Hello, everyone. Yet once again, it's another day of fresh grace and mercy. This is the Guilt, Grace, Gratitude podcast, where we bridge the gap to Reformed Christian theology for your listening pleasure. Today is a season 4, the Reformed Church episode. We're going to be talking about the Canons of Dort with Pastor Reverend Danny Hyde from Oceanside URC in Carlsbad, California. Peter's pastor. And so we're going to jump here into that episode here in a moment. As a reminder, on the show notes, there's some links and information there. You'll find the Society of Reformed Podcasters. That is a group of Reformed podcasts out there that we are a member of. So you can click that link and find other great Reformed podcasts to listen to. You can also click a link to type in your zip code and find the closest Reformed churches near you, the local church finder. You can also find information about how to become a bridge builder, and that's what we call our group of supporters. And then you're going to find out some other information regarding how to get a hold of us, our social media platforms, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, email, all that stuff. And then a little bit more about Pastor Hyde. So we will jump in and discuss the Canons of Dort in today's episode. I'll let Peter further introduce his pastor.
Yeah, we got Pastor Danny Hyde, and you know what? By the time this comes out, there's a possibility that he might have an extra thing before his name. So it's glad to have you back on. This we've been on actually a 40-minute long conversation with them, but you guys are hearing this now a week after our first time. So how's your 10 minutes since we last talked to you been?
Good. Yeah.
Let's pretend we're breaking the ice.
When is this one going to be on?
This will be we'll do Cannons of Dort, and we're this is coming out March 7th. So people are hearing this on March 7th. There's a possibility. I mean, like you said, you're waiting anytime now. So maybe we should just call you Dr. Hyde. I don't know.
Not yet, man. Not yet. I still gotta pass through all the levels of Zelda to get out of here.
That's right.
Well, and a quick little personal plug for Danny Hyde. If you guys know him or know about him or follow him on social media, he is a proud father of a fantastic basketball player. So
as well as 3 other kids.
Yeah. Sorry, I forgot about that.
I got other ones too. You know.
So what's new with your son in basketball right now?
Cyprian, he's a junior, plays for Vista High School here in North County, San Diego. He's a baller, man. He's 6'10". He's a beast. He's awesome.
That kid, I don't know how many high school basketball games you guys watch, but I remember being in high school basketball and not seeing too many people run up and down the court and slam dunk. But this kid, man, he is a gigantic human being.
We have like the tallest church I've ever been to. We have like 10 guys over 6'5".
Yeah.
And Cyprian walks in and he's way above everybody else.
Yeah. And the chapel that we meet in is probably not up to code anymore because it's kind of an old chapel. And so
he has to duck under like some of the parts
Cyprian,
of it.
Yeah. Sip's got to like duck his head from like the foyer into the actual sanctuary because like his head doesn't fit. So it's crazy.
Nice.
It's nuts.
That's funny. Well, cool. We're talking about Canons of Dort with Reverend Danny Hyde. So kind of on the front end. So what are the Canons of Dort? When were they written? Like what is it? Like what on earth is a canon?
Yeah. Hopefully I don't bore too many people because most of us grew up with history class and it was just names and dates, right? But the Canons of Dort, right? So cannons with one end. If it was cannons with 2 ends, it would be an actual like gun, right?
That's right. So it's not the guns of Dort, it's
cannon
something
with
else.
1 end, which is comes from a Greek word kanon, which is like a ruler, right? Measuring stick. So the word canon has been used in Christian history to talk about like rules, regulations, like like articles of faith almost. So it's interesting why they're called canons. But these are articles of faith. Dort is a town that Dort is short for Dordrecht, which is a small town in the Netherlands. It's actually a little island town, and so they were written in like the years 1618 through 19. because there was a big controversy, not just in the Netherlands, Dutch Reformed churches, but also in England with the Anglican Church. And then like the same debate was happening in Spain with Roman Catholics, and all across Europe, the issues of grace and, how does the grace of God work and operate and that kind of thing, the human will, sinfulness, predestination, like all these things kind of get, jumbled together because they're all related, right? So there was a very like popular preacher, professor, that we know as James or Jacob Arminius. And he was teaching things that another professor at his seminary taught at the University of Leiden. His colleague Franciscus Gomarus is the Dutch term, or the Latinized Dutch, but Gomarus in English. And Gomarus thought he was teaching things contrary to what the Belgic Confession taught on predestination. So anyways, it was a long controversy. Arminius died in 1609, so 10 years before this whole like thing got settled. So it ended up becoming like a debate between his followers, and so there became like within the Reformed Church of the Netherlands like a group called the Remonstrants. We call them today Arminians, but they didn't call themselves Arminians. They call themselves the Remonstrants because they're the ones who wrote a remonstrance, which is a protest. So in other words, they were like protesting, calling for change, debate, in the church over what they considered to be like controversial and unacceptable articles of faith. And so it ended up becoming a synod, SYNOD, synod. I was going to say, make a joke that, it's not a synod, SIN, although there were a bunch of sinners there, right?
You got to get a dad joke in there every once in a while.
Wow,
there you go.
Christian dad jokes. I love
That's
it.
right.
Yeah, there you go. So a synod is just a gathering or an assembly of Christians, like, throughout the history of the church. Like a synod is just that's what it is. It's like an ecclesiastical churchly assembly. So anyways, the Reformed churches in the Netherlands wanted help and wanted debate and, wanted this to be an international thing. So delegates from Scotland, England, France, the French got invited, but they weren't able to make it because the king was a Catholic. Various parts of German speaking, Europe, and so forth, like all over the place. They came, they sent delegates, they debated, they discussed, they argued, they harangued, and there was even like a famous challenge to a duel on the floor of the synod.
I've heard of this.
So one of and this is the crazy thing. It's like, we talk about the sort of cage phase Calvinist. You guys, right? The cage phase Calvinist. And normally what we mean is like, a new guy who's becomes reformed, he leaves Calvary Chapel and becomes reformed, and it's like all zealous and rabid, and but he's like zealous and rabid towards like outsiders, right? Like those outside the Reformed Church. But at the Synod of Dort, like they were cage phasers, like towards themselves, like these are like rabid dogs, like going at it. And so one of the professors from a part of Europe, not the Netherlands, he was like saying things that another guy thought was too similar to the Arminian position, the Remonstrant position. And so he challenged him to a duel, like a pistol duel, right? Like right there, and challenged him on the floor of the synod. And the chairman, a man by the name of a great name, Johannes Bogerman, the boogeyman of the synod. He tried to call for calm, and so he prayed, like they had a time of prayer to kind of like calm the storm.
Oh my gosh.
And then right after the prayer, apparently from the story, right after the prayer was finished, the guy challenging him to a duel, I think it was Gomarus. It was Franciscus Gomarus. He like right when the prayer was done, he like re-challenged the other guy to a duel like right away, and so they had to like break the synod up and like clear the floor. Like, let's get some calm and order here. So
at least he waited till the prayer was done.
It's like,
yeah. It sounds
Have a
like
moment of
today's
piety,
cage daisy is
you
not
know?
as bad.
Yeah, a moment of piety, and then get
Yeah,
back
yeah.
into it, right? So there you go. Anyways, long story short, yeah, it's a gathering of Christians in the Netherlands in the early 1600s to talk about issues of God's grace.
Okay.
So why is it one of the three forms of unity?
Yeah, it's not like what you would expect from like a catechism or a confession. It's, it's a little bit different than that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all good sermons have 3 points, so you need to have 3 confessions, right? So,
yeah,
God's a Trinity, so all the good things come in threes. But
Yeah.
it became a confession of faith because of the controversy. So before this point in the Netherlands, in the Reformation history of the Netherlands, there were they had 2 confessions of faith or creeds, statements of faith. They had the Heidelberg Catechism and the Belgic Confession.
Yep.
And then because this controversy, this document, the Canons, was written and it was adopted as when we as pastors sign our names on this thing called the form of subscription, we solemnly pledge and swear to teach the truths that we believe and confess. The Canons of Dort are described as an explanation of some of the points that are found in the Heidelberg Catechism and Belgic Confession. So it's like an elaboration.
Interesting.
On certain points, right?
Okay.
Dealing with, grace, predestination, and so forth.
So this is where a lot of people will relate tulip from, right? Could you go into how this is, or if it isn't related to tulip, and what tulip is? Just because I know a lot of people see the title of this episode and be like, Canons of Dort. I'm really interested in specifically listening to that one because I want to hear about Calvin's the Calvinistic response with tulip and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if people are going to get excited about the title Canons of Dort.
I am. Only true Reformed nerds will.
I think if you change it to Canons of Dork, you'll get more hits.
Wow.
That might be. If we might do that, and then we'll get people who know what that's what's happening.
My gosh.
That's a great idea.
There
You
you
guys
go.
see Cannons of Dort, which is the title of this, you'll know who it comes from.
Nice. That would be a nice parody or something.
You'll probably get like 1,000 emails. Like, I think you guys made a misprint, a misspell.
Some angry emails for sure.
Yeah. Some angry Dutch guys like you misspelled our beloved confession.
That's right.
Where were we? Oh, tulip. Yeah. Tulip. So okay. Well, first of all, in general, the so-called tulip, is kind of like found in the Canons of Dort. The problem with that is the Canons of Dort themselves don't follow that order.
Yeah.
Right. If we were going to use the English, acronym tulip, you'd have to change it to ULTIP.
Yep.
Which it's not very, very attractive.
Not as catchy.
Right?
Not as catchy.
Not as catchy.
They needed a marketing team for Canons of Dort.
Yeah.
They didn't do it right.
God bless those ULTIP churches. They're so hot right now. So it doesn't quite fit the order. And of course, like the whole tulip thing is like an American 20th century, early 1900s. It was like, as far as we can tell, it's like comes from a New York pastor somewhere in the 1900s, like who came up with this acronym tulip.
Interesting.
Because the Dutch would have, like, it would have made no sense because the Dutch word for a tulip is tulp. There's no I. So it just doesn't. So anyway, it's a typical like an American. It's funny that it comes from a guy in New York because don't all like marketing things come from Madison Avenue. So anyways, so it's kind of similar. The same kind of topics are dealt with. Depravity, election, Jesus' death, and so forth. Irresistible grace, perseverance, or preservation of saints. So those general categories and titles and topics are here.
Mm-hmm.
But the tulip thing, and just one last thing to say, like, my biggest problem as a Reformed pastor with the whole tulip thing, besides what I just said, is like, that's not all we believe.
Yeah.
Right. Like I said, the Canons of Dort are an explanation of some of the points in our confession and catechism. Some of the points. the Heidelberg Catechism's got 129 questions. The Belgian Confession's got 37 articles. And the Canons of Dort have, these points of doctrine, some sub articles that are just explaining a few things. Like they're not all that we believe. They're important. Obviously, they're what we believe. But if somebody asked me, like, what does it mean to be reformed? I would say, well, the Belgian Confession and the Heidelberg Catechism. That's what it means to be reformed. Like that's what we believe. As a whole orbed system of thought and practice. Canons are just explaining a couple of things. Yeah. Like in big detail. I mean, don't get me wrong, but they're just explaining a few of the key doctrinal big points.
So quick question based on that, because I'm glad you explained that, because it's not comprehensive. So maybe somebody that's a new believer or not a believer, you wouldn't start them off with the Canons of Dort. You would start them off with the Heidelberg, the Belgian Confession, or the Westminster, or something like that. That's more comprehensive. And then when there's certain questions based on the subject matter that the Canons of Dort answers, because it's more polemical or based on debate form or whatever. In response to the remonstrance that you're saying, that's when you bring in the Canons of Dort based on relevancy.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the way I've always tried to explain to people is, like my third son is a baseball player.
Nice.
So Peter relates.
Me too.
Oh, there you go. So this illustration will relate to you then. So the difference between like the canons and the Belgic, as opposed to the Heidelberg and the Belgic, as opposed to the canons.
Okay.
It's like taking someone to a baseball game, and they've never gone to a baseball game, and they're sitting there, and you're just, and again, like they know nothing, they know no rules, right?
Right.
So you're sitting there, you're eating your popcorn, you're eating your hot dog, you're drinking your, $15, watered down soda. And you're trying to explain to them, like, just in simple terms, like layperson's terms, like the rules, what are those white lines on the grass over there? How come that the umpire, puts his hand up, how come the guy can't climb the fence, and go behind the fence and grab the ball and throw it back in? Like, you just explain kind of some of the basic rules. The canons, it's like being the baseball nerd who keeps score, like on a real scorecard, with the little diamonds, and like he's making all the little lines on it, and like that's an E6, that's a 1-3-4 double play, whatever. It's like,
that's a very reformed baseball player.
Yeah. So Canons of Dort are like real nitty gritty. Like you got to really know like the ins and outs. You got to know all the lingo to kind of get a sense of like what's really going on there. Like Canons of Dort, Heidelberg Catechism, Belgian Confession, it's very, very basic, who's God, who's Jesus, So
so that actually plays directly into my question, because it's structured different than the confession and the catechism. It's not like here's a question, here's an answer, or just this is what we believe, like some reform. So like how is it structured? Like why is there this is what we believe and there are rejections against it or against something else?
Yeah. So so there are like main points of doctrine, heads of doctrines they're called. The first point of doctrine, the second point of doctrine, then there's the third and fourth that are combined, there's a fifth. So it's kind of strange. And then each one of those, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, they have a positive set of articles that are professing what we believe. And then there's, at the end of that is a section of rejections of errors at the end. So that's kind of the big structure. And then the question is, well, why is it ordered in this way? Like, why is it not all tip, right? Like, why is it not in the, or why is it all tip? Why is it not the tulip? It's because they were responding like point by point to a document that the remonstrants, the followers of James Arminius or Jacob Arminius, they had written a document with 5 points. So like the originator of the so-called 5 points of anti-Calvinism, like it's the Arminians who came up with 5 points, not us, right? So when they wrote a response then in the canons, they were responding to those 5 points in that same order. So that's why predestination came first. That's why the death of Christ, satisfaction, so-called limited atonement, came second. Then sin, total depravity, grace, resistibility, irresistibility, and then perseverance / preservation. Like that's the order of the articles of the Remonstrants, the Arminians, and the Reformed guys were just following that order in like point by point. Here's what we believe. Here's what we don't believe. So
yeah, and that's you brought up something, and I've always kind of wondered it. I'm sure that if people have ever looked at the Canons of Dort, they might wonder. So why are 3 and 4 together?
Yeah, because so the original Remonstrants, that's the original protestation, the document that the Remonstrants, the Arminians wrote, their original Article 3 on human sin and depravity is not there's no objections to it. It's a very straightforward, simple way. Now that was written right after Arminius died in 1610. And so by the time of the synod 1618/19, like they had begun saying things like way outside the bounds of that original Article 3. So when they're responding, they're just responding to those original 5 articles. So the original Article 3 was not objectionable. So they kind of like compiled them together. But in the rejections, they quote like direct quotes from their writings, like their later writings. So that's why the canons are kind of complicated, because you can't really understand like the rejections, especially unless you understand like early 17th century Dutch like Remonstrant theology. So but yeah, so the original doctrine of the Remonstrants on original sin and depravity and so forth is not objectionable.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. And then maybe if I'll ask one quick little question, maybe kind of added to this as well, and then I can ask the next question. So with the canons, I know the Belgic and the Heidelberg kind of codified relatively after that. So they're kind of using the Reformed Church as confessional documents relatively after. So how was the canons kind of integrated into the 3 forms? So yeah, this is something that we want to use in our churches as well. Yeah,
that's a good question. I mean, again, like I mentioned in the previous episode, they're meant for us as pastors, especially, to kind of corral us, keep us within the boundaries of Orthodox Christian teaching. Probably like on a practical level, in most Reformed churches, like the most exposure that people are going to get to them is like maybe like a 5-part series of sermons on the tulip kind of thing, and like the pastor might reference like a few articles here and there. And again, it's because they're just like nitty gritty, like in the weeds. It's very difficult for the average person to like just to read them. And then you have to add in the layers of like all the stuff that was going on way back then, 400 years ago, to try to understand what's going on. So typically pastors will, teach on sort of the tulip kind of theme. And they'll use like the positive articles. They might read 1 or 2 articles in the sermon and just kind of like as illustration, because every one of the points of doctrine has like a key article that summarizes the whole. And so guys usually kind of like use that as like kind of a launching point. So yeah. But I mean, I honestly if people ask me, I'll point them out, but I typically don't like go through them in exhaustive detail just because they're very complicated.
Okay.
So, and it's more like the Belgian Confession article on predestination, for example. It's one little article and it's very simple, it's very simple. So.
Yeah. And I asked a similar question in last episode with Belgic, but with the Canons of Dort, it sounds like it's a little more unique because it's very niche and answering some specific questions based on a response. So that's why it's a confession, because it's more of a apologetic response to something. So based on that, and knowing it's not really the intro document or confession that you would explain to a new believer or non-believer, because it's not really comprehensive. We talked about that. With that said, there's a time and a place to use the Canons of Dort based on maybe specific objections and questions that you as a pastor could come across. When have you, what do I even call them, articles?
Yeah, they're articles.
Yeah. Which article do you feel like you've gone to more than the others, if there is one or two?
Yeah, I would say there's probably two sections really, but
Okay.
the first one would be in the first head of doctrine, the first point of doctrine that's on predestination, Article 17. It's probably the most practical of the articles. And it says, I'll just read it. It's very short. It says, since we must make judgments about God's will from his word, which itself is like, when I first read that I was like 21 years old, and you're like in college, and all you, when you go to a Pentecostal Christian college, all you think about is like, what's God's will for my life? And, you're waiting for a sign from heaven. And when you read that line, like we only judge God's will from his word. You're like, whoa.
Yeah, that's not what I thought.
Oh, well, how do I know who to marry? Okay.
Right.
The Bible says marry a Christian, so the rest is up to you. So since we must make judgments about God's will from his word, and then it says, which the word testifies that the children of believers are holy. That's like 1 Corinthians 7:14, right? They're holy. It says not by nature, but by virtue of the gracious covenant, or the covenant of grace, in which they together with their parents are included. So there's a whole like covenant theology right behind that statement, that we believe children belong with their parents to the covenant of God. So all that said, godly parents ought not to doubt the election and salvation of their children, whom God calls out of this life in infancy. So miscarriage, the death of a very young child. This is the article that we go to. How do we comfort believers, professing believers in the church whose children have died? What do we say about that? What we say is, don't doubt, but believe that your child is in heaven. That's what we tell them. So that's the first place. And probably the most practical of the whole of the canons in terms of like the points of doctrine is the 5th point on perseverance. And I won't read it just because it's really the whole thing. But
yeah,
the 5th point, super duper practical. Like, what do I do when how do I react to a Christian who commits adultery, or some big sin? How do I find assurance? What do I do when I struggle? What use are the word and preaching and sacraments to me? How do I persevere? How do I daily look to Christ, in a practical way? That 5th point of doctrine is like, I've preached whole series on that, just that 5th point, because it's such a practical, like, awesome. Here's what the Christian life's all about. God preserves us, we persevere, and there's a struggle in that. So those are the 2 places I would go to.
That's great, because you don't like I'm sure there are some people as they're listening to this, like, oh, it sounds like the canon's like this academic document, super nitty gritty. And then you don't realize there's little golden nuggets in the middle of this stuff that are immensely practical, that if we don't have categories for this stuff, it's funny, Dr. Clark actually didn't bring out this article, but he brought out that exact same scripture, 1 Corinthians 7:14, talking about the Heidelberg Catechism and infant baptism as well. So it's interesting that this comes up again, and especially in such a hard topic when it comes to miscarriaging or whatever it may be, believers who fall from the faith. So it's, even though it's nitty gritty, it's also immensely practical for our Christian life, our Christian walk, those who believe in Jesus.
Or also too, if you're a brand new believer and you're struggling right now because you're realizing that there is that tug and pull of the world, and you're new in your faith in God, and it's like oil and water, and you're really struggling getting into your new faith life, and you have some old bad sinful habits of so perseverance of the saints, what it is to expect, the encouragement to keep enduring.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's refreshing. I'm sure those who are hearing this and maybe expecting tulip are not really sure what Canons of Dort is, but it's much more. It's much broader. There's a deeper tradition. It's bigger than just total depravity, unconditional election, limited atonement, all that stuff. So last question that I've got before we end this out, and from the last episode that we had, so you're on an elevator and you got to pitch Cannons of Dort to somebody. Somebody's like, why on earth do I have to listen to this? I just have Tulip. I can just look at Tulip and say, I got the answers where I need them. So why Cannons of Dort?
Well, I guess I would say the same thing I said last episode. If I get in an elevator and I ask the person, hey, do you believe in Jesus? And the person's an unbeliever. I would say, let's say the person's like, yeah, what's this predestination? Limited atonement, blah, blah, blah. And, hey, well, are you a believer? And they're like, no, I'm a skeptic. I'm an atheist, I'm an agnostic, or, I'm backslidden, or, yeah, I grew up in church. And so my 30-second thing to them would be, well, who cares about predestination in limited atonement? Look to Jesus. Like, do you believe in Jesus Christ? Like, that's what matters. Speculating about eternal, mysteries of predestination, reprobation, like that's not fruitful. The question is, what do you think of Jesus? And if I'm talking to a believer and they're like, yeah, and they got a Tulip t-shirt on, it's like Cage Phaser, oh man, Tulip, Tulip. My thing would be the same. It would be like, don't put your trust in Tulip, put your trust in Christ. Right. So, because you're going to doubt your election, you're going to doubt your salvation. You're going to see lots of sin in your life. And the answer is not Tulip. The answer is Christ. So thus end of the lesson.
Yeah, no, I don't know, Nick, if there's anything else you want to add, and then we'll close this out.
Oh, thanks again for covering 2 of the 3 forms of unity.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. All these together, we got the 3 forms. Yeah, we got 2/3 now. If you guys want to listen to
Clark beat me to it. So he has the Heidelberg book coming out. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah. But yeah, before we end, it's just like last week. We've got a couple giveaways. So if you guys are on Twitter or Instagram, you'll see this as well. So if you go to Guilt Grace Pod, you'll see we've got some giveaways that are both related to Cannons of Dort and some that are not related to Cannons of Dort. But also, you've got a book out on Cannons of Dort. You got kind of your exposition of this.
Yeah,
so you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I don't know if you have it in front of you. I have a copy somewhere in my library here.
I have it on I'm looking on my computer right now.
Well, yeah, it's on Amazon. It's called Grace Worth Fighting For. Yeah, it's like $25 on Amazon. So I encourage people to check it out. Going back to the beginning of our episode here, I have a 6'10", 17-year-old. He eats a lot of food. And so every purchase of one book, gives me at least like a slice of pizza to buy.
That's right.
So,
yeah.
I appreciate your support in advance.
We'll just hashtag this, more pizza for Sip. I like it. Cool. Yeah. Well, we're doing those giveaways, and just like last time, where can people find you? Where can they find your work and more stuff on?
All my books.
More for faith.
Yeah, all my books are on Amazon. You can find me at our church website, oceansideurc.org, and I'm hanging out in the metaverse. You find me. You can find me on Facebook, but I'm not so active there. But on Twitter, it's probably you'll see more posts on Twitter. So
that's right.
I don't know why. That's how it turned out. So
it's so easy to post.
Yeah, exactly.
Easier to talk back and forth on it.
Yeah, that's true. It's not as weird. Like you can't do that on Instagram or Facebook as much.
And your stuff actually, like people actually see your stuff on Facebook. I have supposedly 6,000 followers to my Facebook page, and like if I put a post on there, I get like 300 like impressions.
Yeah.
It's like Zuckerberg wants you to pay to play. I'm like, I'm done.
I haven't logged into that thing in months. I don't even know if my account's still out there.
No, last time I used mine was 2015.
Your account is still there, bro. Trust me.
Oh, and
you can't delete it.
I know you gotta go, but this is relevant to Facebook. That meta thing with the I saw it online. It's actually wrong on so many levels where they're trying to say you could go to church virtually and be an emoji.
Yeah. When's Oceanside going meta?
Hey man.
Oh man, terrible.
Let's do it. Neo and Trinity, up there in the front leading the worship.
That's right. I like it. Cool. Well, yeah. Thanks for coming on. And for next week, we got the Westminster Standards. We have Nick's pastor coming on, John Morris, to talk about that Westminster Standards. But thanks for coming on. Thanks for talking about the canons, and it's been a pleasure. And I'll see you again soon. But yeah, I'm sure we'll talk to you again. Yeah, we've been one of our more favored guests on this show. We'll call it Guilt, Grace, Gratitude plus Denny Hyde.
There you go.
Cool. Well, yeah. Have a great day, and we'll see you again soon.
You too. See ya.